So to kind of pick up where we left off, I'm going to come in here to Twinmotion. I'm going to go into launch, open this up, and I'm going to launch Twinmotion, and then I'm going to open up the project that we were looking at during last class. And I want to show, I want to go over a couple of things again that we already looked at, so and go over some new stuff. So if I come in here to File, I'm going to go to Open. Because this was the last place I was open, fortunately I have everything here. I might actually grab this file path just for now, because one of the things I want to do is, let me minimize that, and let me move this down. One of the things I want to do is to double check our our inspiration. Why is that not working for me? Okay, so this is what we were hoping we were using as inspiration. This is kind of what we were trying to achieve within Twinmotion, and the main thing that this gives us is that just sets the mood, and it's really good to have kind of a mood board and storyboard. We went over that last time. I'm going to keep kind of reiterating that, because this will just kind of help cue you into where you need materials, where you don't need materials, that type of stuff. So if I minimize that, I come in here, I'm going to open up the Farnsworth example. There it goes, and it starts to render. A couple of things that I don't think that I had set up from last time. I'm going to hide my navigation here. One of the things that I did is I came into my settings, into my lighting, and I changed my skylight to this skylight so that I could get quite a bit more of this kind of sun casting through, like what we see in our inspiration. Sun's kind of coming from this upper left, being screened through the trees, and we get some nice shadows going on. The other thing that's really important to kind of play with while you're playing with this lighting and making sure it kind of looks the way you want, is you can increase the intensity of your skylight. And we can see here how it starts to wash out some of these shadows. These shadows don't get as dark. But it's a useful tool to be able to kind of tweak how much that sunlight is going to be affecting your scene. So here I've turned it down and I get a little bit of different shadows. This is one way in addition to changing your exposure that will let you kind of filter that stuff through. Another thing that I think was really good to go through is playing around with this exposure and the sun intensity and your ambient light. These three are what really kind of make this sun through the trees work out. If I come back down to the default exposure, I can see some more of these clouds, but I can tell that all of my background is too dark. So if I come back into here, I can turn that intensity up a bit, and we can see how it's a very different effect than changing the exposure. But it's not very different, but it's just a kind of a different way of going about that. So now I've got a little bit of a different kind of color mood, and this isn't what I'm going for. I'm going for something a little bit more warm and kind of atmospheric than where is that? Here we go. If I look at this, I do want some of these hard shadows. I want this nice bright sun, and I want some of this volumetric fog. And I'm going to show you that kind of where the caveat within Twinmotion is going to fall here. So if everyone remembers, I'm using this path tracer or path traced scene here to get some really nice reflections, to get some really nice kind of shade and shadow. But if I turn that off, I'm I'm going to actually bring this back to 1. We can see I'm getting a couple of other effects in this background here. And the way that the reason for that is that the path tracer does not currently in Twinmotion, and I'm imagining they're going to be changing this very soon, so probably in the next update. But the volumetric fog currently doesn't work with the path tracer. And a couple of other things that we'll notice right away too is we can see the grass starts to move in the wind. So a lot of the dynamics within a scene aren't for path tracer. Path tracer is about kind of a static scene. So we can see everything kind of stops moving, and it creates a render for us. So I do want to show the kind of differences there. Like this is getting us closer to that warm environment, but it's not quite. We're seeing the glass. The glass doesn't look quite right. It looks a little bit more kind of as a cartoon effect. But I do want to go into how I got those settings. So I came in here to weather. Is a really cool tool here. This is a great way to kind of adjust your scene. I think I might be going over some stuff that some of you probably have already played with. At least I noticed a couple of you in your scenes. Anyway, I'm just going to reiterate this in case you haven't played with it. Very simple tool to be able to slide this weather, and you can see now we're seeing kind of dynamic rain. Things are getting wet, and to kind of play around with what the weather looks like, and then we can also play with the seasons. So very quickly I can see my trees are starting to change to fall here, and I think I already like this more. It gives me more of that warm feeling. I can also toggle on path tracer with this season, and we can see I get the season settings, but I don't get as many of my weather settings. So if I turn this off, I bring this over to like a rainy day, and then I use path tracer, it's not going to render in all of those rain streaks. So that's something you'd have to do in post if it's something you desire. But cool part about this is that we can go all the way from a summer scene to a winter scene pretty quickly. Some of these bushes are looking a little weird, probably because these don't exist in a snowy climate very often. So when it does snow, they probably are green. Kind of like snow in Seattle, everything's green under the snow. It kind of looks a little weird if you're used to snow in Montana, because everything kind of goes dormant, is prepared for the snow. Anyway, it's just some fun things with vegetation there. Another useful tip on this is to be able to affect the growth. Again, just a simple slider here, so we can go from like no trees to like massive trees very easily. These can also be animated. We can kind of get into that if you wanted them to be animated, I guess. I particularly don't. And then there's a whole nother side of settings over here in effects, and this is the main one that I changed to try to get that kind of glow, and that smog is what's going to give you kind of very different effects. This to me doesn't feel like smog. It feels more of like humidity almost in this scene, because we're in a completely natural scene. Particles on and off, this is just going to turn on or off whether you see snow or rain kind of falling through. You can change the wind speed. So right now it's going pretty slow, but if you really crank it up and you go and we zoom into one of these trees, they do start to rustle around pretty good. I don't want it to feel like I'm in a hurricane, but you can make it feel like that. And you can also change the wind direction too, if that's something that's particularly important to your scene. All of these kind of ocean settings, this is for more if you had like a coastal scene. If we turn this on, you can see we automatically get kind of a ground plane of water. We don't need that for this. Here we are, like we can go like underwater. I don't know. Kind of a funny thing too, the Farnsworth house has flooded a few times, so maybe it's a severe flood event. But Not particularly useful for this scene, but it could be very useful depending on. There we go. There's the flooded Farnsworth. It could be really useful for your scene. So you can also kind of change the type of water that you're seeing. So if we wanted it to be like a tropical sea or rapids, very quickly able to. There we go. That's probably closer to what the Farnsworth house actually looks like in a flood event. I'm not trying to achieve that. That's not part of my mood or what I want to do. Now I've got waves coming through it. So I have the Atlantic Ocean. But anyway, another really useful tool, very quickly get you probably 90 to 100% of what you're trying to achieve with just a toggle of a button. I think that's kind of the power of Twinmotion and what's really nice about it. What else did we use to kind of affect this? I think we come back into our settings and we go into our render. This global illumination has some extra stuff here. I don't know if we talked about this at all, but this just changes the way that the light is being bounced through your project. So if we kind of up this distance or drop this distance really far down, we can particularly see it on the ceiling here, where it is affecting how that light is coming through that space quite a bit. It's a little bit tricky, and I should probably turn the smog off to be able to see the kind of better version of this. And then this just shows like how much of that light can actually bounce around too. Again, very easy things to kind of play with and tweak and mess around with and have fun with. And these will also be disabled during the path tracer, because the path tracer has its own way of calculating how light is bouncing around a scene. So again, there's kind of two modes to Twinmotion. There's path tracer and non-path tracer when you're working with lighting, and just a few lighting features in particular. So another thing we can do, we can up that sun intensity. That'll give us some harder shadows here, which is kind of what we want from our inspiration. And then we can also bring up ambient light, which is going to kind of give us a few more fills, as is what this setting is supposed to be doing, or it is doing. And then another thing I was going to say is always kind of check as you're going through each one of these. There is a little sneaky more button that'll allow you to kind of go through and just access a few more tweaks in case that the main slider isn't getting you exactly what you want. But as we can see here, this is where I would have to make a judgment call of whether or not this is good enough to kind of sell to the client or convey to the client. And I'll actually turn this up a little bit, maybe to like 80, and I'm going to click on high, and it should actually, there we go. You can actually go to like 3, I think it's at 250. I'm just going to go 300. And we'll let that cook for a little while. So from here, I'd make a judgment call whether or not this is good enough to convey what I'm trying to convey, because it's not exactly this. There's some nuances to this image that I'm not able to achieve within Twinmotion, and if they are imperative that they're included within the scene, then that's where I'd make the judgment call to jump into Unreal Engine. And the reason why I would initially try to do as much as I can in Twinmotion is that it's a lot less expensive in terms of time and energy you have to put into getting there. Unreal Engine is a little bit of a beast of a piece of software, and there's no way that we're going to even be able to just barely nick the surface of the software, even if we were to spend every class for the entire semester just looking at Unreal Engine. We still wouldn't even get close. It's it's kind of like Revit, where it takes about 4 or 5 years of using it almost every day to really know how to use it very well. And kind of full disclosure, I am not one of those users. I am definitely not a power user when it comes to Unreal Engine at all. And in a lot of ways, it does still intimidate me to do quite a bit of stuff in there. Fortunately, we have all these great resources like YouTube and some other. I come back in here. If I go into my lighting and I look at my kind of environment lighting, instead of using the HDRI skylight, if I come into my dynamic sky, and then I come in here to, I'm going to go back to settings and come into location. This will take into account where on the earth that I am, the time of day that it is, and also the month. So this is going to be kind of your best bet. And I have my north offset set kind of weird, so I think that's the actual right place for it. But
Would you just like Photoshop in clouds then? Because the sky can't really change with that one.
well, and that's where I would come in here to my weather. And if I start to change the weather now with a dynamic sky, I'm stuck in there. If I change the weather here, and I'm actually going to turn my smog down a lot because I can't really see anything. So just have a little bit of smog maybe. But if I come back into my weather now, as I increase this, and I'll kind of look up at the sky here, as I change this weather, it starts to build in like more or less clouds based on that kind of weather. And if I don't like those particles, I can turn the particles off, and it'll kind of quit raining on my head. If that makes sense. So that's kind of one way to go through that. And same thing with, well, the other fun part about this too is now if I come into my settings, come into location, and I change that time of day to then be, like the afternoon, these clouds will kind of give me a sunset type cloud. It's not perfect, and it's definitely not as good as what we can achieve in Unreal. But it's the biggest question is when is it good enough? Like this is kind of nice. This is enchanting, and that's definitely not the best cloud system I've ever seen. But again, it's pretty good. So that's kind of how I would handle, like finding like a specific time of day. So at like 3:30 p.m. on June, for example, I could come through and say, all right, I actually want to see what 3:30 in the afternoon would be like 16, 15, 15:50. So that's how I would kind of set it up if I wanted the actual arc of the sun. I'm a little bit frustrated. So one of the things that you used to be able to do is in those settings under the lighting under here. So if you did choose this skylight, it would align the sun to the same place as the dynamic sky. So there was like a toggle that you could use for that. They removed that for, I think, pretty obvious reasons why there would be a conflict there. Because if you're using like a HDRI sky of a sunset and you say it's 12 o'clock, it's going to totally break and not be as happy. So that's how I would handle getting like the exact time of a place. And then or kind of photoshopping something in, or again because we're kind of the authors of this photo, we can take a little bit of artistic license. So if I just make a mental note of where that sun is, I would probably just bring in an HDRI sky and then say, all right, I want to move that now. And so I'll come in here and say, all right, that's too far. It has to be over here. That's probably how I would try to handle this in Twinmotion. And already, like, this HDRI sky looks, miles better than the other one. I think they look a lot nicer, but again, that dynamic sky is going to give you something that's more physically accurate in terms of location. It takes into account where you are on the Earth and your actual time and stuff. So I'm just gonna kind of look over here for now while I can see all of my stuff. There's one last thing I almost completely missed here, and this is one of the most important tabs that we want to go over. And this media tab is really, really useful to get good views out of here. Like, don't just take a screenshot of your computer, unless that's the most useful way to do it, and you just want like kind of a small sample. So once you click on this, it gives you kind of a list of different ways to, or a list of different media outputs that you can get. The first we'll go over is image. So by clicking on it, it'll give us an image, and we'll say create image, and it'll make pretty much like a carbon copy or an exact duplicate of what we were just looking at. So the nice thing about this is if I then start like running around and zooming around, I could come back, and if I click on it, it'll kind of lock me back into that image. One thing to note is on this image, we can see there's like these little dots in the corner. This means that Path Tracer has been enabled for this image. So if I click on it, it'll start to spool all of that up. One other thing to note that's really important about this is all of your sun settings and all of your lighting settings are also saved. So you can see here, if I look up, like my sky is in a completely different location than over here. So all of your settings that you've done to kind of set up and paint that scene the way that you want it are kind of locked in to this image to help you kind of navigate through. So you could have like a daytime scene, a nighttime scene, a winter scene. All of that could all be exported kind of at the same time, or held in their own kind of image container, I guess is the way I would almost say it. It's pretty much like baking all of those settings that you've done into these kind of tiles, which I think is really useful. I think is a really nice way to kind of handle that. So just for example, I could come into this image. One thing to note while you're in here is that you're technically within media mode. So you can jump back to your media, or you can quit media mode. And quitting media mode will then give you access back to all of your settings and bring you into kind of the normal Twinmotion interface. So I'm going to come in here to weather, and I'm just going to say, all right, I want a summer scene and I want a winter scene, and this is looking pretty terrible for some reason. So maybe I don't want a winter scene, but I'll go with a fall scene. I think that's nice. Great. I'm also going to come back in. I'm going to change my lighting. I'm going to make this one kind of path traced. I'm going to bring this down just a little bit so it's like a kind of a cool fall day, maybe, is a fun thing. You can also adjust like the white balance, so I can make this like kind of warmer or cooler, which is nice. Might make it kind of maybe a little bit of a, I don't know, that's fine, at least for this example. I can come back in here, I'll click on image, and then I'll say create image, and so now I have like a whole new snapshot. My camera's in a little bit different location, all of my weather settings have changed, and so I have 3 of these here. which is really nice. So I can go, say, back to or quit media mode. If I come back into my media, I can, let's say I want a video, I think would be the next one. A panorama is going to essentially give you, well, we'll make a panorama. Well, we'll create our first panorama here. Create pano. There we go. It's going to take a while to render. I think I'm going to turn this back to medium just so we're not watching dots and stuff spin. Come back into media here. Video is probably going to be like the next most useful thing after an image, and creating a video is a little bit different. So you're essentially creating what I would say is like akin to keyframes. So when you're making this video, and I'll show it here, I'm just trying to think of, I think I'm just going to do like a slow pan across here for my video. So if I click on video, I'm going to say create video. All right. And so it seems very similar to how the image worked, except for there's a few different settings. So it even gives you like a really nice hint here. So move in the viewport and then click here. So I'm going to move really slowly and just make like this kind of, you know, moody, like if I put up a little camera truck out there, I'll do that. And then I click this plus sign. So now that's given me kind of two different keyframes is what I would call those. And you can add as many of these as you want. And this is very similar to how 3ds Max worked. So I'm going to change, maybe I'll just say it's that long if I hit play. It's a little fast for me, so I'm going to click over here. We have a little bit of a timestamp, and I can say I want this part to be about half as fast. So it was 10 seconds. Now I'm going to say it's 20 seconds. I'm going to click on play. That feels about right to me. It's a little lazy, it's a little slow, but I kind of like it. So I'm going to leave it there. And then I'm going to click on quit media mode. And now I have this video here. And if I click on that video, it'll allow me to kind of come back into it. But I'm back into media mode. So if I say quit there, kind of come back into this main area. I'm gonna go back into media, and I'm not gonna really go over these too much. So I'm gonna make a new video. This video is not gonna be in fall. I'm actually gonna come back here because I have this kind of locked in. I'm gonna click on this one and then say quit media mode. Oh, nope, it brings me back to my default settings again. I'm going to come in here to my weather season. I want to be summer again. And I'm going to come in here to my lighting. And I'm going to rotate this back around to where we had it. Maybe not. If you kind of like it there. Okay. And then I'm going to make another video. I'm going to make this a little bit faster by clicking the number 4. I'm going to click the number 5 to move a little faster yet. And just kind of fly through this a little bit. Maybe we can get a nice scene of the front here. And it just kind of dropped down a little bit more. And come back into my media now. I'm going to click on video. I'm going to create a video. I'm going to just pan forward into the Farnsworth house. Say, add that frame. Okay, so I'm done with that one. I'm going to create one more. And this one I'm going to do some crazy like flying stuff. So I'm going to say create video. I'm going to go up, up, and over. Like that. And there's nothing special about anything I'm doing here. I actually don't really think either of these are very nice. But the one thing that I do want to do now is to show the export tools. So if we come in here, it shows, so if I click on export, it shows kind of all of the different things that we can export, and we can do all of this kind of at the same time. So if I say image, I want to export image 1 and image 3. So if I select both of those, I'm good to go. So now it says multi, so it shows the ones that I'm exporting. If I click on more, it'll give me a couple of different things to be able to change change the format, change kind of a couple of things as well. So if I said like I've never played with refinement. I really couldn't tell you how well that's going to do or be. Motion blur for anything that's moving like super fast. And I also don't know what max lighting does, so I'll just click on those for fun. PNG is fine. I think I'm going to use a JPEG for now just because it's a smaller file. But if anyone knows anything about kind of JPEGs and file formats, JPEGs are, I don't want to say lossy, but the more that you save and copy and manipulate a JPEG, the more it starts to degrade that final image. So they're great for kind of a one-off, but they're really bad for like archives. So if you're going to constantly be tweaking and manipulating a photo for years, don't save it as a JPEG. I'm going to come back into my export tab. For my panorama, I'm just going to click on that one panorama that we made. For my video, I'm actually not going to click on any of those. From there, I can click on Start Export. I'm going to find a place. I'm just going to call it Exports, I think, in my file folder. Say Select Folder. And now it's going to export all of that. I'm probably not going to wait for all of this to go through because I just pretty much just selected everything. Anyway, a cool thing is that all of that's finished exporting. So we can come back into our files. If I go into Twinmotion and exports, I now have my images, which are really nice quality. I forget how big that these are. They are quite large, and those are all things that you can kind of change in the settings. Properties, details. Yeah, these are just my screen, so 1920 by 1080. But I've got all my images here, so that worked out pretty nice.